Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to IMF Webinar Series. It is an initiative by the Indian Mountaineering Foundation to bring to you various stories, experiences, and learnings from the Indian Himalayas. This particular webinar is going to be about the highlights of climbing Mount Saser Kangri IV. Hi, my name is Prem Kumar Singh, and I've been climbing in the Indian Himalayas for over 7 years now. In this span of time, I've undertaken 15 expeditions. And for this webinar, I shall be drawing on my experiences from an expedition that we did to Mount Saser Kangri IV in 2016. Now, Saser Kangri IV lies in the Karakoram range. And as we know, the Karakoram range has two 8,000 meter peaks and around 87,000 meter peaks. Now, the most famous peak in the Karakoram is Mount K2, which is also known as Mount Godwin Austen and is the second highest peak in the world. The Eastern Karakoram range has three massives or mustags as they're locally called. The first is the Siachen mustag, which has peaks like Teram Kangri and Apsarasas Kangri. The second is the Remo mustag, which has peaks like Mamostan Kangri and Remo 1, 2, 3. And the third is Saser mustag, which has peaks like Saser Kangri 1, 2, 3, 4 and Plateau. To get to this location, we begin our journey from the beautiful city of Leh and make our way to one of the highest motorable passes in the world called Khardungla. Crossing the Khardungla, we get into the Nubra Valley and reach a small village called Panamik. And Panamik happens to be the roadhead of the expedition. And from Panamik, we start the walking to Mount Saser Kangri. Now, the Saser Kangri region was first recce'd in 1909. And between 1922 and 1970, there were multiple failed attempts to climb this mountain. It was only in 1973 that an ITBP team happened to be the first team to put men on top of this majestic mountain. Very few expeditions have happened ever since, and some of the most notable ones which made to the mainstream news are these. In 1993, 13 BSF Jawans got buried in an avalanche while attempting to climb Mount Saser Kangri. In 2012, 3 American mountaineers got the Pilots d'Or, or the Golden Isaacs Award, for their ascent of Saser Kangri II. And most recently in 2018, Pemba Sherpa went missing while after falling in a crevasse near Camp 1. Now, this is not an easy mountain by any chance and requires a lot of physical endurance and skill set to attempt. For us, the highlights of this mountain were as follows. The first highlight was its very, very long approach walks. Now, the first challenge in this area is its very long approach walks between two camps. To put things in perspective, if you think of the distance between Panamik and the first campsite, or ABC, which becomes our camp of operation, it is around 1,800 meters. And it normally takes around 14 hours of walking. Now, this walk can be broken into two parts by some teams, and even if you break it into two parts, one stretch, the first stretch happens to be of 1,300 meters because there is no space in between to camp. The whole area is very dry and very exposed. At some places, you have to climb these little chimneys, a little bit of technical rock climbing. At some places, you have to put anchors because the exposures are very high and the land is a little dry and slippery, so you don't want your team to fall in because that would be a very big problem. On an expedition like this, our team was quite regularly putting in 10-hour days, and at some junctions, they even had to put 16, 17-hour days. The second highlight, according to me, of this expedition was its drastic altitude gain. Like I said, in this region, the altitude gains are pretty drastic, pretty dramatic, and the terrain, the route does not allow for intermediate camps. We've already spoken about the drastic altitude gain between the roadhead and our first camp of operation, which is around 1,800 meters. The difference between Camp 2 and Camp 3 is around 700 meters. The difference between Camp 3 and Camp 4 is around 1,000 meters. And mind you, when we say 1,000 meters, this is happening above 6,000 meters, which means Camp 3 is at 6,000 meters and Camp 4 is at 7,000 meters. The third major highlight of this peak was its very long technical sections. Now, of course, there's a little bit of a technical part between the roadhead and the base camp as well. But beyond that, there is one very long stretch of glacier which has many crevasses. And unlike most crevasse-filled glaciers, you cannot negotiate this from the sides because there is very loose rock moraines. So you have to crisscross the whole glacier from in between the thing. The crevasses, fortunately, don't extend from end to end, so we don't really have to use ladders, but we have to do a lot of crisscrossing in this. Another technical part is if you look beyond Camp 2, the climb between Camp 2 and Camp 3 is 65 degrees, and the climb between Camp 3 and Camp 4 is close to 45 degrees. To put things in slightly more perspective, if you're climbing between Camp 2 and Camp 3, you are not only negotiating this glacial wall, this ice wall, you're also negotiating a very technical section of mixed rock and ice towards the edge of it, towards the top of it. So you're already a little tired having climbed, close to 300 meters, 400 meters, and then you have this mixed rock and ice. So with a little bit of an exhausted body, it becomes even more difficult. So this is a picture of us right before entering the mixed section. This is the ice wall, and this is the rock wall, the mixed wall actually. Climbing a mixed rock and ice slope is difficult when it is 15-20 degrees, but when it gets to like 65 degrees, it becomes very, very difficult, it becomes next to impossible. It's very straining, very draining of your energies. It also has this very narrow gullies which you have to climb, and during these climbs, it is very difficult. During these gullies, it is very difficult to find a place to rest. Now the exposure is also pretty high. So a common or regular fall on either side of this ridge will send you down by at least half a kilometer, at least 500 meters. The next highlight was its very temperamental weather and very high speed winds. Now this area is known to have bad weather. It is a proper game of patience when you're climbing in the Eastern Karakoram. Because these gullies are ideal for wind to blow and clouds to build, it is more than often in a state of whiteout. And snowfall at high, there are frequent snowfalls at higher camps, and the winds, especially at the higher camps, the winds come crashing down because it's a gully and the winds have the right space to move, and suddenly there's a wall which is the ridge, the winds come crashing down. Now this was our campsite just a few hours after we pitched our tents. So you can understand how temperamental the weather was. And this is from Camp 3. As you can see, this is where the winds come crashing against the ridge. It's a very, you get very few clear days to make your move. So we got close to 4 days, 4 clear days in the entire 37-day period that we were on this mountain. Now, another highlight that I want to talk about is the action that went on this mountain on the stretch of Camp 3 to Camp 4, because we believe it was too long a day or too long a stretch to do in one day. And the problem was there wasn't any space in between to make an intermediate camp. Now this is Camp 3, this location is Camp 3. So I just want you to look at the location, how it is, and then we'll carry it forward. This has to be one of the most precarious places we pitched. This is the ridge, and it's got just this much of the walking distance. And an idle drop here. Should be around 600, 700 meters, at least half a kilometer. That's how we pitch on the ridge. Absolutely horrendous. That's where we have to go. So as you can see, this is our Camp 3, which has been pitched on a slope, and sleeping in these slopes, sleeping in tents in these slopes is a game in itself, because the sleeping positions are very awkward. And again, as you can see, the tents got submerged in snow just in a few hours of us pitching it, because the weather is very temperamental. Now Camp 3 to Camp 4, this is the route forward. That behind that rock is our Camp 4, and the route goes in between these rocks and straight up. Now, as I mentioned before, the ideal, the regular height gain is around 1000 meters, and the gradient you can see. Now, a 1000 meter gradient or 1000 meter altitude gain in such a gradient is a very, very difficult thing. So we left from our campsite at 3 in the night to make sure that we could cover some good distance while the wind was dead. And from 3 in the night all the way till 5 in the evening, we kept walking and we could barely gain 500 meters. So we had to cut the slope. I mean, we had to cut like enough ground on the slope to pitch one tent, and 6 of us spent our night in that intermediate tent. Now, this was a video which was taken next morning when we woke up from the intermediate tent.
So yesterday turned out to be one crazy night. We started walking at around 3 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, because the weather was super clear. But something happened. What seemed like a simple 1000-meter climb. Well, first things first, it's never a simple 1000-meter climb. We couldn't complete more than 500 meters, and we had to make an intermediate camp on this slope right there. And it's not really a nice slope to be spending a night on. We had to cut through the slope and can make only one little tent site. So we all had to spend our night together. So 6 people in one tent with absolutely no food. Just woke up very tired today. And with the bad news that all the food in Camp 4 has been stolen or destroyed by the crows. So we don't know how much can we survive, how many days can we survive. As of now today, the weather is crystal clear. There's no clouds, there's no winds. This is like the perfect weather to climb. So it should take us around 5-6 hours to get to the rest of the 500 meters that we left. And then the summit approach will be another 400 meters. So yeah, pretty psyched.
So it did not take us 4 or 5 hours. It took us another 10 hours. So this was the second day where we had to put another 10 hours to get to our Camp 4. Because it took us 10 hours because even after that point where we thought we had crossed all the technical paths, these parts were still remaining. These were not as steep as the last pass, but pretty steep and equally exposed. So after the second day, another 10 hours in the second day, we reached our summit camp from where the summit looked like this. It was a fairly easy, simple walk. But what happened at the summit camp is another story which I'd like to speak of on the next segment, next highlight, which was the avalanche. Now, so 6 of us had reached the summit camp, and that night, two of our team members developed initial symptoms of high altitude cerebral edema. So we decided to divide the team into 2 parts. Me, along with 2 people who are not feeling well, were supposed to come down, and the rest of the 3 were supposed to make an attempt for the summit. Now, what happened? The avalanche happened that very day. So the summit team was around 200 meters close. 200 meters remaining of the summit, somewhere here. And our campsite, our Camp 4, is behind this rock somewhere here. So I have already started to move down the next morning with my 2 team members, and we are somewhere here. So this is the time when suddenly, out of nowhere, the whole mountain beneath the summit team's feet started to shift. The whole mountain from this corner, from this arrow here to this arrow here, started to move down, and this left them with no ground below this feet. So the whole mountain moved down through this gully to this. Now you can see there's already a little bit of a previous deposit from some small avalanches. So there were avalanches, but we never could imagine that the whole mountain face will come down. So big was this avalanche that its final cloud debris came all the way to here. Now, it might look very close from the picture, but the distance between this tent and our climbing point where we started to rope up is close to 1 kilometer. Now, what happened is when the whole mountain shifted and the whole avalanche brought all the ice back down, our members, two of our members, went into a free fall of sorts. They were roped up amongst each other, and the rope got attached to a rock on which they started to hang. Now, one guy had a shorter slack, so he stopped before, and the other guy kept falling. And when his slack ended, there was a jhatka which came, and the guy who had stopped before had a cracked rib. So his rib broke, and the other guy had multiple rope burns, and the rope went all the way inside his muscles. So it took us 3 days to get those guys. A rescue was sent from Camp 3. It took us 3 days to bring those guys back to ABC from where they were heli lifted. This was what the avalanche cloud looked like from Camp 2. So imagine it came all the way from Camp 4, not even Camp 4, from almost as close as the summit and all the way to Camp 2, and still so massive. So they finally were airlifted from the ABC and received good medical care and are in good health now. This mountain has some unfinished business with us. It taught us a lot. It had all the elements of mountaineering put into one small packet. In 37 days, it showed us avalanches, showed us blizzards, showed us hurt people, showed us some very immense amount of climbs. But there's still a part of us which we left on the mountain. It's an unfinished business, and we'd want to go back to the mountains sometime soon. The reward for climbing a mountain like this happens to be the beautiful views.
What a beautiful day, crystal clear weather, no clouds, beautiful. That below down there, if you can see a few tents, that's our Camp 2. And on this ridge somewhere down there, around 500-600 meters down there, is our Camp 3.
So I hope you enjoyed this webinar and would consider going on your own expeditions sometime very soon. Thank you very much for tuning in, and do watch out for the next webinar.